Welcome again, the third. Who would have ever thought we'd have made it to number 3? Well, here we are, ding ding, round 3. Ty, if I could just start with you perhaps. Now, a co-founder of the Education Foundation and chair of EdTech UK, an immense responsibility and good success on that as well. What would you say are the main developments in UK EdTech technology? And also, what do you think are the things that are coming up onto the horizon we should look at?
Well, first of all, I think it's a dynamic, exciting sector. I think you have to have a UK perspective. What's happening in terms of England is very different from Wales and Scotland and Northern Ireland. So that kind of overview is absolutely vital. It's one of the fastest growing sectors of the digital economy. I think it surprises many that not only is London a capital of EdTech, but throughout the country, and I'm talking places like Cardiff, Edinburgh, the southwest, throughout the country, the northwest, are EdTech firms that are, I think, beginning to get real traction in schools, colleges and across higher education. I think there's also a sense that that push from companies into education institutions is beginning to bear fruit. I'm very interested also that policy that I see in Wales and policy that I see in Scotland is perhaps not as evident in England. And I think what we need to see in England is the pull of policy. Policy is important. It creates the framework. It creates the kind of environment for educators in classrooms and lecture theatres to almost give themselves permission to experiment with education technology. So it's really important for the British economy. I can see it growing exponentially. It's also a major force for British exports. I mean, this is about Britain exporting across the world. The education brand is very strong. The technology brand is very strong. And I think also it's really incumbent on all of us to be growing regional economies throughout the country. Developments, I think, an increasing understanding from policymakers that they need to support this sector. I think we're going to see announcements, I hope, very soon from England. We have a Secretary of State in England, and again, it's important to realise that we've got different education systems across these wonderful islands of ours. But I think we're going to see developments in England. I think we've got awareness, I think, from leadership teams that education technology can help with knowledge, consolidating knowledge. It can help with workload. Workload is a particular pressure at the moment. It can help also with linking school and community. I think for too long we've perhaps ignored the role of parents, and I think we'll probably touch on that later in our discussion. But involving parents in those young people's learning is absolutely vital. And also, frankly, education technology is opening up worlds that we couldn't have imagined even 5 years ago. Worlds of creativity, worlds of making, travelling to different parts of the world while you're still sat in your own classroom. For me personally, I want educators involved in education technology. I speak as somebody involved in policy. I speak as a parent. I want educators involved. I want educators to feel confident. I think training is a particular major challenge. So we've got a world to win, and I think we've got an EdTech world to win. I've never thought it was a kind of magic wand. I particularly, think it's a powerful tool. It's not new. We've always used technology in schools. I was talking to somebody the other day about BBC School Radio. I just see this as part of that development of using a different tool to reach young people, to support young people's learning. So I'm optimistic. I'm here to learn as well. I think what we've got around the table is a whole different series of perspectives that are really important on this issue.
You talked about pace of change in there, and rightly so. How important do you think it is for schools to keep up, and how do they? Where do they find the wherewithal to keep up with this pace of change?
Well, often they don't, and often I feel it's sometimes it's about who they meet, and that can that happenstance in terms of children's education, frankly, isn't good enough. I think, we need structure. A school-led system in England is really important, but all of the messages that we get back from the EdTech sector is that knocking on thousands of different individual school doors in England is a major challenge. It's a major cost for the sector. It's a major cost for startup or scale-up businesses, but I think you need to aggregate. So what I'm seeing in Wales is national movements. We've got the hub, HWB, and we're actually sat in Wales here in this round table, or this rectangle table, and Scotland as well with Glow as an attempt to put resources online, easily accessible for teachers to use and experiment. And I think that's the kind of key message that I'm beginning to pick up, is that once you start this journey, your confidence increases as an educator. It is about admitting also what you don't know and seeking out help.
I think you're absolutely right. There is a great opportunity to bringing Kellie Williams here. As the lead practitioner for eSafety and e-cadets and safeguarding at your fabulous school, Cornist Primary School, and thank you very much for bringing the young people along today as well, and we'll hear from them later in this recording. You've done enormous work there as well, and I just wonder, how do you see the classroom developing in the future as far as technology is concerned?
I can see technology continuing to shape classroom practice and pedagogy. I can see, or I'd like to hopefully think that we'd see more of the VR and the AR being brought into the classroom, made more affordable, and blending the two worlds of digital and physical together, really, to, as you said, Ty, to just create much more rich learning experiences for the children. Looking further ahead again, it'd be great to see AI being used in the classroom. I think using technology like that, we can definitely make learning much more personalised, much more meaningful and purposeful.
We heard from Matthew earlier talking about his experience with Google Earth, and I asked him this really interesting question about using that software. Would that influence the places he'd like to visit? And that's a brilliant opportunity to hear a young gentleman talk about how this informs his real world landscape as well as his virtual world.
Yeah, definitely, and we use a lot of Skype in the classroom in school as well, and then they blend those experiences with using Google Earth and Google Maps. Once they've spoken to children in a different classroom, like they've spoken to children in Shanghai, in Croatia, in America. I mean, that's just, you couldn't teach that, could you? It's, no. Learning's not out of my mouth anymore, out of a textbook. I can actually physically take the children, well, not physically, but virtually take the children there and let them experience something completely different.
And how do you think the children respond to you, the class practitioner, not being the only expert now in front of them? They've now almost got a plethora of expertise in front of them. How do you think they're coping with that? How do you think the students are coping? They thrive off it. You saw the children this morning. They absolutely, they're empowered by helping not only their peers but helping the staff as well. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I like that. Al, I'm turning to you as an education software developer, and we're all familiar with your product portfolio, but I'm sure we'll hear soon about that as well. An amazing contribution to safeguarding as well there. How do you and how does your business keep abreast of these kind of developments, and how do you stay informed?
It's a challenge. I mean, you could argue a good conversation like today is a really good starting point as a PLN. I mean, everybody has a different perspective. Yeah. Education, you learn a different contrast to the commercial world. The commercial world often is focused about keeping ideas to yourself, keeping your IPR under control. And education is very much about sharing and supporting. And I think the only way that you can keep in touch is to be part of the education scenario. I don't think as a business you can talk to educators in terms of telling them what they need. You have to understand what the need and the demand is and then facilitate. And as Ty rightly said, it should be teacher-led. It needs to be educator-led, whether it's teachers, whether it's the frustrations of TAs, linked to the fact we've got a challenge in terms of resources. I think you have to be involved, whether it's these kind of round tables, having close people that you can share and bounce ideas off. There are a number of regional technology events, which links into Ty's scenario, because the UK as a whole is not the same when it comes to education landscape. So last week there was an event, Tech on the Tyne, that brought educators together from one region. And you see the conversation similar but subtly different, whether that's the driver because of choices they've made or the funding landscape and so on. So I think you start by having to be heavily involved. And then, you know, EdTech, I'm really resonating again, Ty's comments. From our perspective, EdTech is a facilitator. It's an enabler for teachers. It doesn't turn a teacher into an outstanding teacher. It allows an outstanding teacher to be fantastic in the classroom. And your comment about introducing other resources as the teachers as well, the roles in the classroom, you know, it kind of resonates with a comment I've heard Mark talk about in presentations about moving from the sage on the stage to the guide on the side. It's about bringing those resources in together. As a technology vendor, we then have to look and say, well, if we want to facilitate and enable in the landscape, how is that landscape changing? So a good example would be 10 years ago, I'd be having this conversation and we'd probably be using the word Windows all the time. And now the concept is about that mix of platforms. The regional split says, you know, if I'm in the US, I'm talking much more about Chromebook and cloud-based computing. In the UK, I'm talking about iPads, I'm talking about Windows devices, MacBooks, a combination. And as I move across into Eastern Europe, Android suddenly appears as another alternative platform. So I think there's understanding that breadth of the infrastructure, and often the conversation tends to be about we want to engage in fantastic resources like AR, VR, we want to tablet enable one device per child, and schools invest in that. And then the missing link is both the training that Tyra talked about in terms of enabling the best possible use of that resource, but also there's a bit behind it, which is the infrastructure. The number of schools have got fantastic iPads but haven't put the wireless infrastructure in place, or haven't got the technology to actually manage and maintain that, so that you can then actually evidence that it's having an impact. And we were talking last night, and impact was a term that kind of cropped up, which is, there's two strands to it. One is you're spending public money, therefore you've got to be able to be confident that that money is best used and deployed in the school. So you need to be able to evidence the impact. But also, if we want to enable future educators to buy in and bring new ideas to the table, you also need to have the tools to evidence that what you're already doing has impact, to help justify that journey. And I think the third part in terms of us in the industry is working with new companies and new startups. You know, there are challenges in the UK market for a small startup to actually move into the educational space, because it's hard to get a voice. You know, it really is. But I think actually what we've seen is the most successful companies, and I hope I would include mine in that, is those that work collaboratively with other companies. They don't see them as competition, but they see them that they work in parallel. You know, and a good example is working with Henry and eCadet, seeing that synergy with what we do from a safeguarding point of view, working with specialists from an eSafety point of view, working with trainers that can actually enable schools to get the most out of technology, you know, and equally, as well as obviously working with teachers to understand where their pinch points are. The long-term picture as a developer is finding out and understanding where the landscape is, and then making sure we deliver tools that are fit for purpose. And that kind of brings it back full circle.
Indeed, you mentioned something really interesting there about the devices and the kind of the different operating systems. When we asked our young people earlier, they were very clearly device agnostic and just didn't see any issue between switching between Chromebooks and iPads, and it was the right tool for the right job. And
in some environments, I mean, in some schools, you have a mixture. I mean, the UK landscape's a good example where we have the move to the academisation process. If you have schools that, you know, are using a technology that's specific to iPads, and another school has Chromebooks or Windows devices, the continuity of having tools that are agnostic across those platforms, both from a student engagement point of view, but also supporting teachers to have a consistent platform that they're familiar with and can use in the classroom. It's another challenge, and of course the challenge goes back to developers, which is you're developing multiple versions of your technology. So we have to be smart and just say, because we developed it that way in the past, doesn't mean that's what's fit for purpose today. And again, the young people tend to drive that you want to deliver on a platform that gives them the broadest possible experience. And I love hearing about VR and AR, and I'm sure we will again through our conversation, because I always see the focus is on about those core subjects and about getting the right level of, you know, of attainment and progress within schools. But that race to attainment and progress runs the risk that you narrow the education experience of young people. And EdTech actually has a really important place to play alongside that, to say we can broaden the experience in a different way by giving them those experiences, enabling them to actually lead and be and share, you know, whether it's digital citizens or whether it's group leading and peer work in the classroom. Tech can be a really important tool to support great teaching.
Good, and it was great to ask the young folks what they enjoyed using the most, and let's hear from them now. Can I just start by asking, during school times, this is my interesting question, in your class, how often do you use devices? Now, I know you've brought some and you've left it on the table, and that's great, but I want to know more about that. Matthew, can I start with you? What devices and what tech do you use in school?
Well, over the past 2 weeks, we've been studying a country each class. We did Canada, and we've been doing presentations on Google Docs and things like that. We've been using Google Classroom as well.
Excellent. I'll ask you more about that in a second. Poig, you were going to say?
Yeah, so in my class we use a lot of the Chromebooks when we're doing it, because normally it's like we use Chromebooks at least once every week. And we don't normally use the iPad, so unless somebody else is using the Chromebooks.
Excellent. Apple will be delighted to hear about that, I'm quite sure. Oliver, what about you?
We use the iPads and Chromebooks quite a lot, and we also have an interactive whiteboard that we do our maths on. Not the teacher demonstrates on the touchscreen whiteboard.
Okay, that's really good to know as well. Ellen, what kind of technology what do you use in the classroom?
Well, we usually just use our iPads and Chromebooks to do our work, like slides and sheets and stuff, to show our work in a different way rather than writing it down in our books. But we also use it just to kind of do it in a creative way so that we can show what we can do on the iPads as well as in our books.
Brilliant. Can I just ask about other teachers at school? Do you ever find yourselves having to help another teacher at school?
Yes.
Tell me more, tell me more.
It's my teacher, because he's basically just learned how to use his computer properly. So then he's going, how'd you do this? And then I was like, it's that button there, it's that button there. And then when he tries to set stuff up, it usually not working. He's like, I can do it. And then we're sitting there for half an hour just waiting for it to turn on.
I know, many a time have we all spent that as well. Go on, you go first.
I have to always sort the whiteboard out when it doesn't work, and our teacher's just learning to use Google Classroom and stuff.
Well, it is still fairly new, I have to say, so, you know, it's okay. Go on, what were you going to say?
My brother's teacher sometimes has to get one. There's a year 3 eCadet in my brother's class, and my brother's teacher sends him up sometimes to ask for me and Oliver's help because like the whiteboard's not working or the sound's not working or something like that.
And sometimes I get asked to like set up the computer for what they want to do in the hall because she doesn't know how to do it. And I normally do that for her.
And when we have assemblies, I go down and set up the PowerPoint on the board, and I sit there for the assembly and change slides for the teachers.
Brilliant. What about you, Kellie?
Well, because Mr. Go-Kart, our teacher, has only just learnt to use Google Classroom and that, so he's getting other teachers to show him, but then he forgets, so he's asking us to show him. But because it's fairly new to us, so we've got to show him, and then he's learning from us, which is good to me because I like showing people how to do things, and then he makes us show everyone around the class it, and that makes me happy, showing other people.
And what he'll do as well, he'll use something that can't be shared by the rest of us. He'll use a different program, so because normally we share it on Google Docs, but he'll use something else, so then I have to change it all to Google Docs so I can share it with the rest of the class.
Absolutely brilliant, absolutely agree with it as well. Mark, can I just bring you in now? As a past practitioner, brilliant classroom teacher, and now touring the world as the ICT evangelist here. I just wondered if you had specific advice for schools. How do they keep themselves up to date with what's going on?
It was really interesting hearing what Kellie was saying about the children in your class, being able to sort of pick up one thing and then work with something else and work with something else. And relating to what you were saying, Ty, as well, about technology giving us the opportunity to do things that we wouldn't be able to do without the technology. Your learners being able to sort of move from one thing to another, different platforms, that sort of thing. Teachers don't really, in general, have those kind of transferable skills. And staying on top of everything is really difficult. Utilising things like your eCadets to support teachers in their training and their learning around technology is really good. But the most difficult thing And one of the most difficult things for teachers is that idea of being able to sort of make sure that you're getting a learning return from what you've purchased and the stuff that's in your classroom, technology-wise. And it's really difficult when you're really tight on time, your workload's a big issue, all the rest of it. I always sort of follow the Michael Fullan approach, which is about keeping teaching and learning at the core of what you do, and then think carefully about how you can then apply technology to that to bring new learning opportunities. So that's the one thing. The other thing I think is really important is trying not to look at there being sort of one big fix for everything. What we see working really well in schools isn't where a school sort of goes all in on one particular product that's going to change everything. It's lots of little things that when combined, can make a much bigger, it's a marginal gains kind of idea, isn't it? Yeah, so rather than having one big thing, lots of little things that when added together cumulatively can add a bigger return. So great example with your conversation. So yeah, we're using Skype in the classroom, but then we're using Google Earth for this, we're using Google Maps for that, so forth and so on. And by using those things across lots of different platforms, you're learning and doing far, far more than you would have been doing without the technology. So yeah, my best advice really is to keep it focused on teaching and learning, and don't try and think you can find one big thing to change and transform everything. Every day is a learning day, and if you can just take one little thing each day, trial it, scaffold it, become confident with it, have it there in your toolkit, and just like you've got lots of pedagogical sort of things in your teaching and learning toolkit, over time you'll build up loads more technological ideas about what we can use in the toolkit, and combining those things together. It's a bit like TPAC, that technological, pedagogical, content knowledge model, which is a sort of three-way Venn, where you can bring all those things together and know when it's right to or not to use technology. Then you can start seeing some of those returns. But it takes time. It's not a short sort of thing to work through. It takes a long time to get that confidence and to know when it fits right and so forth and so on. And every school is different as well. Every child's different, and that's the skill of the teacher. You're that guide on the side. You're helping, making micro decisions all the time with the young people you're working with. This just takes time and practice.
What if the guide on the side now is a Year 6 pupil who's part of your digital leader network? How comfortable should staff still be in letting those young people lead on the technology sometimes?
They should be very confident because, I'm not a person who subscribes to that whole digital natives, digital immigrants kind of thing at all. Children are good at the things they want to be good at, from your Snapchatting to whatever. But you put them in front of an EdTech product, they're just like anyone else. But what they have got is that resilience. And children, when I was teaching full-time, my student digital leaders were amazing. The transformation that happened in the school was largely down to them. I'm sure you see that yourself in your place. People say lovely things about the things we do, but actually it's the children that bring those things on. So I'd be saying, take on board what they're saying, try it. Because co-creation with your learners in however you're trying to sort of work in the classroom is great. It gives them ownership, it makes it authentic, it gives them agency, all those things. So yeah, take on board what they're going to say and try it out. And if you're a bit unsure, say, well, could you do a little dummy run for me? Could you create a practice one? Can you then demonstrate how that would work in the whole classroom for all of us? And that takes it away from you. You haven't got to worry about the confidence for yourself doing it. It empowers them, it gives them skills beyond what they would normally be having in the classroom, like literacy, oracy, present. There's so much you can do just from saying yes. The power of yes to some people, to young people, is huge. I remember a child that I used to teach who came to me and said, I'd like to build an app. And I could have said no, we can't support you, or I could have said yes, and we said yes. And that child's journey then, through from sort of Year 7 to Year 13, youngest app developer in Europe at the time, speaking at Apple conferences, all sorts of things, all off the back of just me. He did all the work, not me. But that empowerment that children get when you give them that positive yes, and you'll be able to support them, is huge. So I'd always say yes to the children when they want to try new things out, because it's great for everyone, and it's great to be able to role model that for them and for colleagues as well.
Well, I think that's really good. Thank you very much indeed. That concludes topic number 1 for today's discussion, and I think we've given that a good outing. Turning to our second topic today, safeguarding eSafety, trends and actions. It was splendid and wonderful to listen to our young people today. Thank you so much, Kellie, for making that happen, and how confident as digital citizens they are, and the immense amount of knowledge that they're acquiring and doing so well. I'm so impressed with that. As their digital leader, Kellie, I wonder, you must be thrilled to hear how confident they are in explaining things, and the way they interacted with each other was just absolutely perfect. Where do you begin to teach that huge breadth of knowledge and this vast landscape that is the internet today?
Yeah, good question. I think you've got to begin by embedding digital citizenship across the curriculum. So we spoke before about having it weaved amongst all the curriculum areas. So for example, instead of just having standalone lessons once every term or whatever, it needs to be something a bit more regular. So for example, you might be having a history lesson and you might be researching about the Romans, but that's a good opportunity for a member of staff to discuss copyright and plagiarism. So it's getting it in across the curriculum, maybe in places where traditionally it hasn't fallen into place. Secondly, I think just as important is utilising pupil voice, pupil power, listening to learners. So we're an e-cadet school at Cornish Park. We have a team of e-cadets who every half term they meet in the library and we do something called bubble time. So in bubble time, the whole school knows that it's going to happen, and they can just drop into the library and they can just talk to the e-cadets about their problems, concerns, whatever's going on online at the moment. I train the e-cadets up to say, like we do for child protection issues, I said you can never promise to keep a secret. You need to make that clear to the children who are coming to you. And once they've been and given some advice, the e-cadets then fill out an online safety form, or an online incident form. And that way I get a spreadsheet back to me which shows exactly which social media or apps or anything that's kind of creating the most problems in our school. I look at that with the e-cadets then and the senior management team, and we will then organise appropriate assemblies or maybe lessons to actually suit the needs of the children in our school. That works really well.
I like that we've talked about the children leading on this. Let's take a moment to listen to a couple of them talking about this. Now you're all been using e-cadets in school. I'd like to understand a bit more about how you've been using it and what it's meant to you particularly. Perhaps I could start with you, Ellen, as well. So how have you used it to keep yourself safe in school, and what has that meant for you? E-cadets, so how have you used that in school?
Yeah, we usually teach lessons to usually assemblies or lessons in classes where we'll basically have a topic like a safe profile picture or what information not to give out, and then we'll teach a lesson. Then at the end we'll ask them if they know what information is good to give out or what's a safe profile picture, so they basically know how to keep safe online as well. Okay,
that's really good. Porrick, what about you? How are you using e-cadets?
Well, for the assemblies and stuff, and the lessons, we normally do it for year 3s and above, and we do different lessons for the year 3s to the year 5s and 6s. Also, if there's someone with a problem, they can come to us, and sometimes we do bubble time where they can just come into the library and tell us about something at dinner time and stuff like that.
And what do they tell you?
Like if there's been an incident, they'll tell us about that, and then we'll fill a form in on the iPad and then send it to Miss Williams.
Oliver, what was the last incident you had to deal with?
There was someone in my class, and they were having inappropriate pictures sent to them from a person in a different country, and we sorted that out.
Excellent. Can you remember what advice there was for that? How did you close that down?
We said block the person that sent it, and if it happens again, come and tell us, and we'll sort it out and maybe report it or something.
Brilliant. That's really good advice. I like that as well. Lily, what about you? When did you last have to help someone?
On Musical.ly, someone had posted a video, and then people had been commenting nasty messages. So we reported the comment, and then we blocked that person, and then I went and told them, and then they deleted that Musical.ly.
Brilliant.
So I just said, try not post, because they had a logo on their t-shirt as well. So I said, don't post with a logo on, because people were asking where do you live and what gymnastic club you go to. So I said, don't post it in front of your house or any information that they can get from you.
Brilliant. Matthew, why do you think people are so nasty to other people online?
maybe they're getting bullied online as well, so they feel like doing it to someone else to show them how they feel.
I just absolutely love the way you all just kind of are above all of this and have such great advice. It's really good. I'm really enjoying the conversation as well. Henry, what a brilliant opportunity now for you to just dive in and mention some of your favourite products here. But clearly, digital citizenship is a key change mechanism, certainly for Kellie's school. And what are the challenges for you, and how do you use GoBubble in the kind of extended format there? I just wonder, particularly in primary school as well, how important is it and how young should children be?
I think digital citizenship is incredibly important, and as Kellie has rightly said, it shouldn't be seen as a standalone lesson or a standalone topic in its own right. It runs across everything and every single stream, just like now devices do. It doesn't matter, we've already spoken about being device agnostic and how devices are brought into different lessons and can show lots of different learning capability and open up the world. In exactly the same way, digital citizenship runs throughout every aspect of the school day, but also, and most importantly for children, it actually has to run outside of school as well. And I think sometimes that can be missed as the opportunity with true digital citizenship, is actually looking at the whole child and their entire life, and that's how they engage back at home, it's how they engage with the wider community. In terms of, you asked about what age should they start, I kind of have a vested interest. My son is 2, my daughter is 6. And when we started eCadets, it was just before Sophia had been born. So I've always, whilst creating it, have had very much two minds. One is as a developer, I'm working very closely with our superb PLN of educators to make sure it's appropriate for the classroom, but then also as a parent and seeing a child grow up, it's a case of, okay, well, when is that right time? When do you start having those discussions over how to engage with devices, how to engage with the internet and technology, to start to drip feed things? And essentially for me, it comes back to the analogy of really, it's like swimming. We all know that the earlier you can teach a child to swim, the more proficient they become. Well, it's exactly the same with digital citizenship. The earlier you can introduce it, the layering that you can then start to bring in wider issues as the child progresses and gets older, perfect. And for me, that's very much where it works. So for mini eCadets, for example, that we have, mini eCadets deliberately starts at reception age. And we have, okay, the children aren't necessarily leading the sessions like they do as eCadets in primary. It's still, at that point, it's teacher-led. But the lessons and what you're communicating is appropriate to the age. And really, it's starting to introduce the role of what a computer is, what a device is, the type of things we need to think about. And then, as Kellie rightly says, not just looking at it in isolation, but how can it fit across the curriculum? So, for example, we bring phonics in. So, we have a matching game where the kids will actually match the letters to the words of the people who can help them. So they know, they're matching an M. I'm going to go into my opera. They match an M to mum. Mum can help. There's a picture of mum and the colours match. Sure. So you find all those opportunities. Now, I think as children progress and grow and their learning evolves and their age evolves, then you start to open up wider topics. And that's very much where you then have to look at differentiated learning, because what works in one school might not necessarily work in exactly the same way at a school even 200 yards down the road, let alone a different part of the country. I was mentioning before in the first segment about how at different EdTech events you'll find similar topics, but actually it's how that's employed, regional issues can come through. So there always has to be a certain amount of guidance and support you can give, as well as the freedom, the ability to tailor. And that's based on age. It's also based on issues, as Kellie's rightly said, which are local to a school that can come through. And it's very much about that personalised learning, because you see great evidence, and Kellie's school is a fantastic example. So I mean, Kellie's school as eCadets, they've taken it and flown, and they've actually ended up with year 2s teaching teachers on copyright. And there's been other kids, year 3s, actually designing posters for the local library to then actually share that learning across with older members of the community that use that library. So they've recognised that they can actually train up grandparents about safe shopping and how to spot with phishing. And there's so many different opportunities. And that's where I'd say, and rightly as Mark was saying, when you look at the role of a child and how it fits into digital citizenship, always say yes, because the creativity that they have, what they can bring to the table, and how that can grow is tremendous. I think you mentioned Go Bubble. I think as a developer, and again, Al has mentioned this in the past, and I know Ty has seen exactly the same with the EdTech businesses. There is a responsibility that falls on you as a developer. One, to engage with teachers and the education community to make sure it's fit for purpose. Yes. But also as a developer to be very mindful that whatever you create has to be the safest it can possibly be for those end users. So if you can free them up to be independent and safe, superb, because that's when real impact can come from it.
So I'm hearing collaboration and I'm hearing embedding. Kellie, I want to come back to you, if I may. You won a fabulous award, and congratulations for this, the National Digital Learning Event Award for your approach to digital citizenship. And I just wondered what advice you might have for other schools that might like to pursue that same goal.
I think firstly it's about developing a whole school approach, having the policies in place, as we've just discussed, utilising pupil voice and having a pupil group that lead on that. So the eCadets is a brilliant example of that. We've also spoke about making sure that digital citizenship is throughout the curriculum, as a cross-curricular responsibility like it is in Wales at the moment. Staff CPD is really important.
Right. My question there is, how have you ensured that your colleagues have embedded that and taken the responsibility? That's a tough order.
Yeah, we start every school year with some CPD opportunity for the whole staff, and I'm talking about from the cleaners, the dinner staff, the teachers, the TAs, the support workers, right through to senior management. They all receive online safety training. Wow. So that's looking at how to keep the children safe, but also how to keep themselves safe as professionals working in a school.
So a whole school approach is really, would you agree with that as well, particularly from the training point of view, Traci?
100%, 100%. When we look at the staff in school, what we know is that children have a very different relationship with their teachers than they may have with their lunchtime supervisors, for example. But our children are more likely to talk about the sorts of things that they've been doing online with those support staff, and it's so important that they have an understanding of online safety, as is listening to the voice of the child, which I think everyone has said around the table today. I mean, that, again, I can't stress that enough. Our children, it was interesting listening to them on the session this morning, and we were talking about the sorts of things that they're doing in the classroom, and they have this amazing knowledge and a thirst for knowledge, and they want to share that. They're ready to share that. They're talking about educating their parents, educating teachers, and the wider community. I was loving that. I was loving what you were saying about the posters going into the libraries. I mean, that is genius. Easy, really, really effective, and it's spreading that knowledge, it's sharing it. And we need to use the expertise that our children have. We need to use that, and we need to share that. Yeah? But we also need to make sure that our teachers and our teaching staff are comfortable, that they're up to date with the sorts of things that children and young people are doing online as well. Because educated children start with educated adults. If we don't know it, if we don't know what they're doing, then how can we expect to possibly keep them safe? So we need to have that skills. We need to have those conversations with children, and they are being more honest, in my experience, than ever before. Yes. 5, 6 years ago, you'd ask children what they were doing online, and they would zip. Now they will sing like a bird. They will tell you exactly what they're doing. They'll tell you that they're live streaming. They'll tell you that they're playing GTA 5, even though they're only 7 years old. They will tell you these things. If we know what they're doing, we can help to keep them safe. We know it's going to be incredibly difficult to change their behaviours. We might not stop them from playing Fortnite, and a lot of them are playing Fortnite, but we can educate them on how to do that in a safer way. Yes. We can educate them around risk and keeping themselves safer, and again, it's incredibly important. One of the other things I loved this morning that your students said, they were talking about how they keep themselves safe, and they came out with all sorts of things, all your usuals, not sharing your personal information online. None of them said we shouldn't talk to strangers online, no. Which for me is actually a really positive thing, because our children are talking to strangers online. So they were talking around the table about playing Fortnite. They are playing against people that they don't know. They're communicating against people that they don't know. So if, as educators, our standpoint is we don't talk to strangers, we've already lost our children. So again, it's about us as adults keeping up to date, keeping up to speed with what children are doing, and being realistic about that as well.
And Ellen had Ellen had a lovely clarification there, where she talked about not strangers but people you don't know, and that's let's just have a quick listen to that. Now, the internet can be a great resource. You've all talked about online resources and how important they are. Google Earth for you, Classroom, lots of apps and everything. But the internet can be a pretty unpleasant, dangerous place. And I'm interested now to learn from you what you understand to be dangerous and how you keep yourself safe. So, Ellen, perhaps I can start with you. What do you understand about the internet and the dangers, and how do you keep yourself safe?
It's easier to keep yourself safe if you know what information you need to keep to yourself and what information you can give out. For instance, I wouldn't give out where I live, what school I go to, what my phone number is, unless it's like, if I'm talking to a really close friend in person, that information's okay to give out then, but it's not okay to give it online because anybody can see it then.
Absolutely, that's a really good answer.
For the profile pictures, you don't want to like take it like in front of your house where you can see the sign, or in your school uniform, because then they'll know around where you live and they can follow you.
Okay, so what do you have as your profile picture on anything at the moment?
I don't really use social medias.
Interesting. What I think also colleagues will find disturbing, if not somewhat alarming, is with the ease with which our young people around this table spoke about suicide prevention. Now, I know lots of people go, whoa, this is year 6, what on earth is happening here? But clearly these young folks have understood there is mental and social, emotional well-being issues with their peers, and they're rolling up their sleeves to deal with that. But people aren't going to be comfortable with that, Tracy, are they?
No, people aren't comfortable with it, and parents in particular. We had the big thing with Logan Paul before Christmas and the whole Suicide Forest video. We know that hundreds of thousands of young children have seen that video, and we know that parents have had to start having those conversations with children about suicide, and parents are saying, I'm not ready to have that conversation. I don't want to be talking to my primary age child about suicide, what suicide is, why people do it. But the reality is, this is the sort of thing that our children are being exposed to online. And again, as adults, we need to take a reality check, and we need to step up to the plate, and we need to have those conversations. When we're looking at the mental health and mental well-being of our young people, we're seeing young people who are struggling on levels like never before, numbers of children that are really struggling with their mental health. We're seeing a real squeeze on services, so we're seeing referrals to CAMHS. You're having to have a really high threshold before CAMHS will even pick you up. So then we've got children, young people who turn to the internet. They're looking for self-help websites online. So how do they manage their feelings? How do they manage what's happening to them? Some of those sites are really helpful and really useful. A lot of those sites really aren't. And again, it's about that quality of information. So we've got children who may be experiencing mental distress, and we need to make sure they've got the skills so that they're accessing appropriate and quality advice and information when that happens.
Ty, you were going to say?
Fascinated by your approach. It's brutally honest, isn't it? And discomfortingly open.
It has to be. It has to be. In my experience, I engage with parents who think this won't happen to my child. This isn't an issue for me. And I think that we really need to take a reality check. I think I've gone past mollycoddling, and it's like, actually, this is what's happening. Not to all of our children. That risk is out there. We need to keep that risk in proportion. All of our children aren't going to suffer mental distress. All of our children aren't going to get groomed online. But that will happen to a significant number of children. As adults, we need to be aware of that. We need to deal with it.
And how do you think our schools are doing? Do you think our schools are playing catch up?
Yeah, some schools do this incredibly well. Some schools don't. When I'm looking at safeguarding issues online, or safeguarding online in general, I think that we've seen massive issues over the last 5 or 10 years. I was very much an early adopter of the internet, and so certainly over the last 5-10 years, huge issues where we've kind of sat back and we haven't done anything about it, and it feels like over the last 2-3 years we've gone, actually, that there might be really big issues with these particular things. Perhaps we should do something about that. But at this point, we've already lost a generation of young people who we have left them to their own devices.
Yes.
We've not given them the support, we've not given them the education, and these are our young people who are now having children of their own. And do they have the skill then to parent their children to make sure that their children make smarter, safer choices when they're online?
Before we come to Al, let's just remind ourselves of what the young folks said on this subject. And I was refreshed to hear the young people speak so confidently and calmly about it, and prepared to hand out support to others that may be more vulnerable than themselves. What has most surprised you about either the app or the behaviour of people that use the apps as well? Perhaps I'll start with you, Ellen.
It's usually because how serious the situations they get in, because people come to me, like Oliver said, with people that send them inappropriate pictures, and it just makes me wonder how people get in these situations at like same age as us, 10, 11, 12 and stuff like that. It's kind of worrying, to be honest, because then you think, well, if that can happen to them, it can happen to me.
That's a really good point. Lily, what about you?
Well, on Snapchat, there's a way where they can, if they zoom in, they show you the exact street and the exact house you live in. So you can change it to ghost mode, so they can't see where you live, or so they can't stalk you or anything.
Pretty good. So Matthew, what has most surprised you about what you've learned?
About, like Oliver said before, how some people can commit suicide from being bullied.
And they don't like talk to somebody else, they just commit suicide without telling anyone.
Okay, so what do you think the solution to that is, might be?
Be more open about it and
tell
talk.
everyone and tell someone if you're being bullied.
Okay, and what do you think the barriers might be for that? So how do you think we could encourage people to talk more openly about that?
It's usually because if you're too young for an app, they get scared that if I tell somebody, they're going to get angry at me because I'm using this app when I'm not supposed to, or I'm too young for this app, so my teacher will shout at me for using it. But like, if you're in this situation when you're being bullied, they're not going to get angry for that, because they're going to try and sort it out first. Because lots of people who are too young for Instagrams don't come to us because they feel like, oh, I'm going to get shouted at because I use Instagram, they're not supposed to use Instagram. But like, if you have a problem, come talk to us, because it doesn't matter, because we won't shout at you. We're not the ones who tell you what you can and can't use.
No, I think as those of us who are advising schools, we've kind of, and parents and young folks, we've given up saying, look, you shouldn't be playing this. We just let everyone know that there are age restrictions for some things, and it's a parental or a guardian responsibility to ensure, you know, we just kind of accept the fact that you're going to get into stuff you shouldn't be into. But what I'm really interested in is how you kind of cope with those situations and how you deal with that. And I'm really, really pleased to hear some of the great advice you were about to say.
We just let people do what they want to do and just help them when they need it.
So Matthew, how do you think you could be more approachable? How do you think you could help people who might be anxious, worried about something? How could you put yourself out there and be more friendly? How do you think you could do that?
By saying, if, like Lily said before, or Ellen was it, who said you think they're going to get shouted at if they realise that you're using an app that you're not supposed to. Just tell them that it doesn't matter. It's not our responsibility. It's if you have something wrong, that's what we deal with. We don't deal with if you're allowed to use that app or not.
Do you think that other young people that have got problems, either bullying problems or they've seen something online that is concerning them, do you think that they're more likely to talk to someone their age or younger or older than an adult? What do you think, Ellen?
It's because like it helps that you're like the same age or just a little bit older, because sometimes it's scary, because if you're going to an adult, they have stronger opinions about things and they think you shouldn't be on that completely, but we kind of understand what they're going through exactly, instead of just like seeing it as Instagram, we see it as what's exactly on Instagram, what they're looking at and how to solve it completely. But plus it's easier to go to someone you know at the same age, or someone who's in the same school as you, or someone who's best friend, say, because I've had my best friend come to me about something.
And we've also got year 3 and 4 e-cadets. So if anyone younger in year 3 and 4 they can tell the year 3 and 4 cadets, and they can come and tell us. So that might make them feel better because they're younger and they're the same age.
They might be too scared to approach year 6s and tell them about it.
So we have year 3, 4 cadets the same age as the younger people, so it's easier for them to approach them.
I think Matthew makes a really good point about other young people thinking that if they go to an adult they're going to get shouted at. Well, that's certainly not going to happen if they come to an e-cadet person or someone who's younger or older or the same age as them. They're just not going to do that. So I think having more young people like you, more approachable, is a really good thing. I think that's just absolutely brilliant. So Al, that's a serious challenge for us. How can technology step up to the plate here and deal and cope and manage and support practitioners in post who often have to deal with the fallout of this?
Well, you're right, it's a big challenge, isn't it? And I suppose the truth is, we're back to a conversation we had earlier about there are ways that technology can support and enable practitioners to be more aware, better informed. And if we start at the very high level, and I can kind of switch over first of all to a trustee and a governor hat, we all as stakeholders in school have an obligation in terms of safeguarding at any level. Technology is just one strand of safeguarding, but we have an obligation in terms of protecting our young people and providing a safe environment. As governors, we have an obligation to make sure the right policies are in place and are enforced appropriately. But we can then switch over to keeping children safe in education, and within that framework there's obligations on the school in terms of internet filtering, age-appropriate controls of websites, monitoring tools and so on. So we can kind of start and say, well, how do we empower or provide that kind of information? You know, and lots of the strands today are about facilitating access and how do we know about what children are doing online. And it's very easy to take a one-size-fits-all, and we've kind of identified it really isn't the case with schools. No. So the approach that we've taken, was to look and say, well, the starting point is about context. If you want to know what kids are doing, you have to have a reference point. When a child's talking about a certain topic, how does that flag, trigger, make people aware? But there are different types of triggers, for want of a better word. You know, we could have a conversation about children that are engaged in bullying. We could have a topic or a strand in terms of keywords that relates to body image that might trigger intelligence in terms of identifying that as associated with year groups, and that might be the prompt for an assembly for those children. There are the more serious topics we've talked about that have more of an immediacy, and the immediacy is more about suicide, self-harm and so on. It could link into prevent duty, radicalisation in some cases where there's a certain sense of immediacy. So you need to have phrases that can associate against that and make sure that there's a different approach to it. So back to the one-size-fits-all. If it's low-level activity that you want intelligence about, and that can include children being children and just learning about sexual terms and content and so on, sure, you can gather that information and you can provide word clouds that give you a sense of what are the trending topics by year group, by vulnerable students, and that allows you to see and deliver. For more serious issues, you can capture those keywords, trigger alerts, and you can take screenshots of videos and you can send them directly to classroom teachers or to your DSL and say, here's something that needs greater input. The key, I think, is always about context. There are, as always, lots of tools out there that over time you develop tools become more fine-tuned, become better. And a lot of tools have taken the developer approach. And this is really back to the conversation earlier about, is development educator-led or is it commercially led? That say, well, anything happens will trigger an alert to a teacher. And the result is he's got hundreds of emails coming in your inbox. Sure. You can't skip them because one of those could be something really serious. But in practice, it isn't practical as a system. And Mark has always been a strong advocate in terms of marginal gains. And sometimes you can change very subtle things and make a big difference. So surely the student, the time of day, the application they're using and the location they are is actually just as relevant in terms of context. A child utilising or referencing a term about a bomb, if it has the terms how to make and it's in a Google web browser, would probably be more at risk than a child typing the word bomb and Hiroshima in a PowerPoint presentation. So context is key. And you have to wrap that context and provide it in a way. But, we're here today in Wales. Language changes, terms change. Just around the UK, there are different phrases that are used. So I could take the context of drugs. children seeking to buy drugs, exchange drugs, which is happening increasingly in secondary schools. The local terms for cannabis and so on will be very different. We also have, across the UK, in some cities, like where I'm based in Peterborough and our trust, have very high numbers of EAL students. So you also have to have language support. You have to have the ability to take those trigger phrases and have databases covering all of your key landscape of languages. But you also then have to allow for the fact, and this is because we want to have the best possible intelligence, that a child from Poland typing on an English keyboard doesn't type grammatically perfectly. It's a phonetic response, so you have to put that context in place. We also talked about the fact that it's this, you know, this platform now is children are using all sorts of different devices, and so you have to have a unified way of joining it up and bringing it back together. And that's one of the areas that's been the driver for us, is to bring all that information together. So you've got the proactive side, which is informing the professionals as to what's being done, what activities are being searched for, where a child's at risk, working with organisations like the IWF to make sure you've got the reference points for online grooming and so on. And then you flip it around. You know, we've talked a lot about the proactive stuff in terms of digital citizenship, but you can also, from a technology point of view, start that process. How do you empower a young child to report concern, seek help? We assume that they will go to a class teacher, but actually sometimes it's the conversation needs to be one step removed, and it's a different teacher they trust based on the nature of the conversation. So just in the same way there's an obligation on secondary schools to provide information about FGM in areas where girls can access privately and then report to have an issue around that area, we take the approach which says, well, why shouldn't you on every technology device, no matter what the platform, have an icon you can click on where you can report a concern, and it lists the staff that are trained and appropriate within the school, and you can pick somebody you trust based on the topic. Add some evidence if you're being bullied online. There's a copy of the Facebook thread where they've talked about me, or someone's posted a picture, and we've had all sorts of issues now in terms of sexting and people sharing content. Provide that information or a link to say this is what's happened, and then pick where you go to. The second part is, much as we have around the table some great educators focused within the safeguarding digital citizenship, we also need to empower young people to access resources in a broader sense. Sure. And I know the question is, as we've said, Traci said, there's some fantastic resources and there's some more questionable resources. So why not steer them? Why not provide a simple list of all the key resources that are available, that are verified, that are valid, that are appropriate for young people based on age, where if they wish, outside of the school framework, for home-based issues, they can seek help and advice. And I think, again, it comes back full circle, certainly in terms of my focus and role, whether it's a developer or working with education, is provide the tools to empower the specialists to do what they do well. Don't try and replace the specialists, just facilitate so that they are able to do their jobs better. And I think that's where technology can play a part. It's almost silent, it sits out the way. And you know what the best tech is? It's just doing its job, but it's not actually getting in the way. No. And so that's very much a strategy that's built around what we've done at Netsport.
It's really good. But Henry, we heard from the children this morning that not always did they turn to the technology, or an adult, they turn to another young person, because we know that young people, if they want to make a disclosure, often that is to another friend or someone, perhaps they don't know, but the same age as well. And it's no coincidence that these were eCadet pupils that we spoke to. And how important is that in their role?
It's essential. I mean, really, that's where the eCadet started. From my time in the police and dealing with online safety issues, and coming from a family of educators, the number of cases that I was dealing with where increasingly the first disclosure by a child was to another child started to increase, and it started to highlight. I mean, we're going back 7, 8 years, and it started to highlight, well, actually, there's a piece of the jigsaw there. And I think it's always important to think of online safety, digital citizenship as a jigsaw. It's the different pieces that go together for the full picture that can keep a child in terms of their development safe. Sure. And one of the pieces that was really prevalent was that first disclosure. But in terms of the support for that child who the disclosure is being made to, in terms of that education, in terms of the skills and how to identify risks, that was something where increasingly it became aware, well, actually that child needs specialist support and specialist education to have that. And that was very much where the mindset for eCadets came from. That was the germ of the idea. And then it was a case of, okay, well, how can we help those teams of children who, and it's not their primary role, but you know, it has come through in more than one school, in more than one area, where there have been disclosures that have gone through. How can you help that child so they are not carrying that pressure on their shoulders, and it's not causing extra stress for them, but actually that they see that it's part of them being able to help their friends, that they can be the eyes and the ears, and that's where very closely, you know, we link through, just as Traci was saying, in terms of, you know, different members of staff can be there to lend a friendly ear at different times. It's exactly the same for a child as an e-cadet. They're there as eyes and ears. Every other child knows, because we're very clear in how it's communicated through in schools, every other child knows that an e-cadet is there to help. However, if anything is ever raised, the e-cadet's responsibility and duty is to go and speak to either the coordinator or the head. And to give an example in terms of, you know, how that's worked at another school, it wasn't Kellie's, it was another one. There was a child, very streetwise, year 6, playing PlayStation in his room. PlayStation was his life. And then through the chat, starts getting messages from a stranger who doesn't know, and the stranger was able to identify that the person he was talking to was a child because of the way that the name had been set up on the account. And these messages started to come through in about a 20-minute window, and there were 4 messages in total. They started off fairly benign, but very quickly escalated. And the last 2 were basically saying, look, I know you're a child, I'm about to get into the shower and get naked, I want you to turn on your camera so you can watch. And the final one was, if you don't do it now, I'm going to tell your mum. Now that streetwise year 6 boy didn't respond, turned off the PlayStation, so far it's ticking all the boxes that you would want a child to do. You know, they haven't engaged back, they've turned off the device, they've stepped away from it, great. But he was so embarrassed, he felt it was his fault that that person had just tried to groom him. He was so embarrassed as well, he couldn't tell his mum, because he was fearful for upsetting her and how she may react. What he did, because it was a school night, is he knew the next day he could go into school and tell an e-cadet, and he did. So even before the first school bell had rung, on the playground, went and found an e-cadet and said, look, this is what happened to me that night. That e-cadet said, okay, come with me, let's go and see the head. Literally took them by the hand, went and saw the head, sat down with the head and told them. The head called us and said, look, what would we advise? So we gave some advice, which was basically, look, you need to contact the police because this is a live criminal offence that's happened here. Local police were called. Within 24 hours, they'd actually been able to identify where the offender was, which was in America, liaise with law enforcement over there, and 24 hours later, the offender had been arrested. So within 48 hours of the offence happening, someone was actually in custody. And the police actually came back and said, it's because that child knew they could go and talk to a friendly face as an e-cadet that actually helped to expedite all of that. And then help keep other children safe because the person who's committed the offence has now been identified and arrested. And you know, then it was very much about, okay, well, what support can you give back to the cadet, to the child, to the family, and then you do that layering and take it forward. So it's not just deal with it and step away. But I think it's essential that we recognise that children are discussing issues. Yes. You know, they are sharing, you know, the most sensitive things. You know, as you're saying, suicide is one of the things that can be shared. It's our personally, I see it as a duty on myself, you know, as a developer and you know, the person who created the e-cadets, that it's our duty to give those children the most support that we possibly can. So if that's ever presented to them, everybody knows throughout that whole cycle that there is support, that it's trusted, and that.
But clearly, I think you're right. I think it's a duty. It's a moral imperative, but again, very very complicated for some adults. To go into that territory, and
because they're fearful as well.
They're fearful. So I think you've got a blizzard of information for parents. I think you've got a kind of a sense of not, you know, kind of tech backlash, a tech lash. People are kind of going, what's happening to my data? Yeah. I think there's a kind of sense also that we really need educators to be in this space, and I go back to what I said earlier, and I think there's a real confidence issue. We've got to protect and empower staff to be having some of those quite tough questions with questions and discussions with young people, and I think that's where we need to get to. And I think also if you just think that EdTech is coding, so a single-minded focus on coding, I think undermines the digital skills yeah, the basic to more sophisticated digital skills that you need. If you just talk computational thinking and coding all of the time, yeah, you then also, I think, tend to undermine some of the discussions that we need on digital literacy, digital citizenship, and that worries me.
And we heard from the children this morning who said in their own voice and their own words exactly the challenges there. Kellie, I wonder if I can ask you, were you surprised by anything that your children said this morning?
No. We've got a really open relationship in our school with the children, so everything they said this morning was super. Yeah, was true of what they say talked to us about in school.
They are very confident young people, and it is no accident that they are eCadet trained and they have an escalation process and they are very confident and very competent. And I think that's really interesting. Can I just touch base with you, Mark, as well? Have you seen any new eSafety trends, just very quickly, perhaps now as we kind of wind this up, evolving in your space? You know, apps, are there new apps? Are there new developments?
What I'm seeing an increase of really those sort of apps that children can use in the lesson, not just to talk about things around sort of mindfulness and well-being and that sort of thing and reporting, but tying it also into learning so they're able to discuss how they feel like they've got in the lesson. And all this information is really, really helpful for teachers, you know, so they can find out where children are at. Sometimes it could be, you know, through a bit of text or an emoji where they might sort of reference how they feel like they've got on with the learning, but equally it could be that often, you know, meeting and greeting at your classroom door is a great way to sort of like, how did you get on, Russell? How did you get on with the football last night? How was the, you know, having those sort of conversations there are really helpful. But often we're so busy as educators, we don't always have that time to do that. And you know, I would say a little bit more difficult in secondary as well. I mean, you're not just seeing those same 30 children all the time. You can sometimes see sort of 300 children a day, you know. But having these sorts of reporting apps that allow you as an educator to see what's going on, you know, try to sort of tell you about something that happened last night. Having that information at hand, and it might not necessarily be a huge safeguarding issue, but as we know, relationships have a huge impact on learning and progress and safety and well-being. And so having those sort of things in place are really, really good. And that's what I'm seeing a lot more of coming through, which is really nice to see.
It is just refreshing and delightful. Well, let's just bring this topic to close now. Thank you so much indeed for all this. We've been chatting about safeguarding and e-safety with some very interesting and very revealing content as well. All of you, thank you so much. Turning now to our third topic of discussion today, I'm interested in the challenges across the sector. And I want to know from each of you, please, your number one challenge in your sector or your discipline or your expertise, and what you're doing to make a positive impact. Ty, it's a big question.
It is a big question. Where do you start? I mean, this is a rich, diverse, exciting sector. I think it is supporting young people profoundly. I think it's helping to support and think through teaching in different ways. Also, I think it's not without its context. We've talked about some really uplifting contexts. We've also thought about some much more negative and quite difficult contexts. And I think often as an educator is you kind of think, I think one of their challenges is, where do I start? Yeah, what do I pick? What is useful? What is a good tool to support me on whether it be maths, whether it be literacy, whether it be exploring different worlds, nature, art, creativity, whatever. And I think that's, for me, has been, you know, the question is, how do I know what is good? How do I know what is useful? And I think what we tried to do with the EdTech 50 was through a variety of public vote and judging, and quite a rigorous judging process, was think about impact, think about innovation of product, and also think about whether a product was committed to actually looking at itself and changing and being flexible, and listening to the voices of educators. So I guess what this is an attempt to do is this, the EdTech 50 is a landscape view. It's a manageable flick through. It's almost a kite mark, almost a badge of what is effective, different people's approaches. It's taking a landscape view. And I think to try and demystify EdTech, I mean, I think, you know, we've had a conversation here where, you know, frankly, it is a tool. It is not complicated. We have responsibilities as the developers, as Henry said, responsibilities as educators, responsibilities as advisors, and responsibilities as businesses. But I think we've got a responsibility to actually choose good EdTech, positive EdTech. We've got to be pragmatic too. I don't think we can afford to be happy-clappy about EdTech. We really have to be grounded in the reality of schools, and also I think talk about ourselves and talk about EdTech in perhaps different ways, and much more accessible ways. So that's what that attempts to do.
And it's no accident there are some people around the table that are in that book as well, which I think is a good one. Mark, I'll come to you in just a second. Tracy, same question again. What are the challenges for you, and what are you doing to make a positive impact on that?
I'm a rule breaker. I can't choose the top one thing. For me, there's two, and the first one is parental engagement. We really struggle with that. Historically, we've struggled with it, and we will continue to struggle with it. When we're trying to engage with our parents, it's always the parents that we don't need to reach. If we hold an event in school, it's always those informed, interested parents that turn up. It's not the parents that we really need to reach. No. So certainly with eCadets, I know I'm doing a digital leader scheme that's just been funded by the Police and Crime Commissioner in Derbyshire. We're looking at using our children to educate their parents. So how do we change that message? How do we change that dialogue? So we're using our children to be the voice. So rather than having someone like me come into schools, sometimes that's really effective, sometimes it really isn't, but using our children to try and get those messages across to their parents, and for parents to open their eyes to what children are actually doing online. Well, if we look at things, some of the children this morning were talking about the Musical.ly app. And I know I've had conversations with parents saying, it's lovely, my child's singing and dancing and they're having a great time, doing some lip syncing, oh, it's just so wonderful. And I'm thinking, with the potential there to be groomed online, and parents completely unaware of that. Yeah. So engaging parents for me is incredibly important, but incredibly difficult. So how do we do that, and how do we do that without trying to get parents into school? So we're drip feeding that information. So I've got children making videos that are being hosted on school websites about Fortnite. Tell me the pros, tell me the cons, tell me about the parental controls. Do that as a video, host that on your school website so your parents can watch it, and parents will engage with that rather than coming into school. We're getting children to write articles for school newsletters. We're getting children to take over the school's Twitter feed or the school's Facebook account. They're writing things, it's coming from their mouths, and that is far more engaging and empowering to parents than it is having an adult standing giving it all this. So yeah, and the second thing is consistency. So we don't see consistency across schools. We don't see consistency across clusters or across a county. So we can see very different ways of dealing with the same issue. We're just not uniform. We need to be coming together and looking at how we address these problems in a uniform, collective, and educated, sensible way. And at the moment, we're not doing that. And that's a great source of frustration for me, and I'm sure for teachers in school as well.
I'm sure, but great advice there as well. Henry?
I'd say the top problem, but then also the solution which I found attached to it. So you know, running an EdTech business and being a developer can be incredibly lonely. Because you know, you find that you've surrounded yourself with great PLN in terms of the educators, but then stepping out of that school environment and then back into either your office, or you're working from the kitchen table, which is where eCadet started. It can be incredibly lonely. And I think for the EdTech industry, it's interesting because there's something very unique about education, and in particular about teachers. As a son of teachers, and that's that teachers, irrespective of the school and across school boundaries, will always talk and share and communicate to each other. And I think as an EdTech industry, when it was in its infancy, it wasn't necessarily the same. The developers were working in isolation, in their own little silo, and not reaching out to others. Thankfully, and this is where the solution sort of comes in, is that then sort of gradually and through and I will say it's not just because he sat to my right, but the excellent work of EdTech UK in terms of bringing people together, having the conferences and putting the developers in the same room kind of forces conversations to start, and then identify synergies where there isn't competition and there isn't overlap, but actually there's the opportunity to work together and to collaborate. And that's one of the journeys which personally I've been on over the years, is that working in isolation, but then identifying that actually there are people in the sector who you can engage with, and then forms almost form of like mentor-mentee relationships. Al and I have that relationship, so we can talk and share aspects of the businesses, and then feed off experiences, and then sort of share, I suppose, experiences from our life cycle back in as well. But then there becomes a responsibility. And that responsibility isn't that you simply then stop at that point and sort of take all the good in. You then have to give the good back out. So one of the things which I've started to do now is I've been approached by the people on LinkedIn who are either starting up EdTech businesses or want to move into the EdTech sector, and they're like, how have you done it? What kind of journeys have you gone through? How do I do marketing? What approaches do I do? So now deliberately I will give up my time for free to offer counsel, meet with people and chat on the phone or conversations through social media to try and give some advice back to others within the sector to help them move forward. Because I think if you stop at the point where you think it's just me and that's it, the sector will die. Because ultimately the customers, the teachers and the schools don't operate like that. So if the people who are doing development operate like that, there's a disconnect. And very quickly, and this is why again I love teachers so much, they can suss out the people who are in it for the short term, and they can suss out the people who are actually in it for the good of the kids and the real impact. So
it leads beautifully into Al now as well. Single challenge?
Well, I suppose the obvious one would have to be money, to be honest. Within the EdTech context within schools, it's a topic that I often discuss. We have a national message which is there's never been more money in schools than there is today, and yet in reality there's a lot more kids in schools. And if you look at the national funding formula, there's typically 1.5% increase over the next couple of years for school funding, but 75% of the school cost is teachers, and teachers increment each year, certainly for the first few years of their profession, and therefore the incremental cost in terms of impact to school funding means there's less money. And the area that's been hit hardest has been the capital funding as well for schools. So if you have a context where there's less money, you have a greater obligation to get more out of what you've got and put more evidence behind it. And so I think that the one area for me is money has led to schools having to be more self-aware about the technology they have, how efficiently it's being used, where it's deployed and whether that's the place where it has most impact, whether the technology that's put on top of that hardware, whether it's the software that's paid for, whether it's valid, whether it needs to keep being renewed and done. Changes in legislation like we've had recently with GDPR add a hidden cost to schools. So obviously the biggest cost is time, we all know that, but also an obligation for schools. You've now got to provide tools that allow you to discover where your data is stored, make sure it's not in the right places, deliver endpoint security so that you can protect USB sticks being used to move data. A few years ago we had Prevent Duty and an obligation on schools to provide those tools. So increasingly the move down the line is to put more onus on schools to fulfil these different types of policy. And you either sacrifice time or you deploy effective technology to kind of underpin that. And so I think that the pressure on money is extreme in education at the moment. That's not to suggest that every school is maximised for efficiency, but it does play into then the longer term argument about we've seen with maths, which is how do you deliver economies of scale? Are there economies of scale? And we've discussed it before and always recognised that within a structure of schools working together, the economies of scale lie in those centralised services, finance, HR and IT. That means that if you can more effectively deliver the business of a school, you potentially deliver a saving which can be put into the order of the day, which is teaching and learning. And there are some significant economies that can be made in terms of more effective IT, joined up thinking IT, but also to empower people to try new IT. And a conversation we always have, is you do the same thing, you get the same outcome. At some point, somebody has to take a lead and say, be bold. If we all sit and celebrate and say, this great technology we know enhances learning and experience, How does it go from a conversation around this table to being something that schools implement if the answer is always, we've got no budget? Well, how do we change the budget? The budget's fixed, we've got to change how we spend it. We've got to be dynamic and we've got to be creative, and something has to give so that something else can deploy. But if we all believe that we're in education, we're in whatever hats we are, for kids to get better experiences, then that's what we've got to do. Otherwise, we're just going to stick on a screen or a textbook.
And I know someone is going to have some great input into this one as well. Mark, you're always ready to give great advice with great resources, often which don't cost the earth, and I'm always pleased to hear about that. Challenges across your sector, and what are you doing?
It's funny because I mean you guys have kind of like pulled up all the things I would have mentioned, but actually if I just sort of bring together some of the strands that you've said and add my sort of two pennies. So one of the things you didn't mention in the EdTech 50 tie is not just the EdTech companies and what have you that are there, but there's some great educators in there, which are signposts. You know, some great people like Ollie Lewis, for example, or Jose Picardo, Dom Norrish. And these people who are really sort of doing great things, and they're, again, being in there, they're a great signpost for people to come in and find out and learn about more about that sort of thing. I completely agree with your consistency thing as well. We talked about it earlier. You know, if you're looking and thinking about year 10s, year 11s, and you want them to have a consistent approach to how they're using technology in all their lessons. You don't want them to be going into one lesson and using Microsoft Teams, another lesson using Google Classrooms, another lesson using iTunes U, another lesson using Edmodo, so forth and so on. They've got enough to remember without having to remember different ways in which they submit their work and get it marked and all the rest of it. And then budget as well is huge. You know, there's so many schools that I work with, and I'm in the classroom, I'm sort of looking around, and I can see technology just not being used. You know, the things that are at the back of the cupboard. And so bringing all these sort of things together, what are the big issues? Well, it's around confidence. One, the pressures that the workload brings. I mean, teaching is one of the toughest gigs going. You know, if you think about what the average teacher works something like 70 plus hours per week. You know, it's really, really tough. And so I spent a lot of time trying to sort of wheat from the chaff a little bit, because not every school leader has the information they need in order to make informed decisions. And I try and be pretty agnostic in the way that I share stuff. And so the resources that I put out there, which are always free, are there so that I can sort the wheat from the chaff and highlight those things which can make an impact, can have a difference, that sort of thing. And again, like I mentioned in that earlier segment, it's not about those big all singing or dancing things, it's about the little things you can do. And when you've got some half-decent kit in your school anyway, there are loads and loads of things you can do which are completely free. Mm-hmm. And if you have some joined-up thinking on that across maybe a sort of a working party in your school that can be thinking about how that then links into teaching and learning across the whole school, that can have a big impact. So yeah, that's the issues I'm seeing really.
Marginal gains, as you rightly say, marginal gains. Kellie, what about you?
Similar to what you said, Tracy, definitely the biggest challenge that we faced, not only in our school, but in the schools I visit around North Wales, is parental engagement and getting them on board, educating them. We've done a few things in our school to overcome this. We have them in to learn with the children, so we invite them into classes and into lessons. We've had evenings, we call them freaked out parents evenings, where we invite them in, we feed them chips and curry, and the children do like a speed learn event. So you've got pairs of children on each tables, and they've literally got 5 minutes on each table, and they're going around learning about different things to do with technology and using it to help education. That's normally really well. We also have a digi desk, so every parents' evening, our e-cadets and our digital leaders sit at the desk in the main reception. They make all the posters and banners for it, but it's a bit of a stop-off point, because then you get every parent coming to parents' evening, or more or less every parent, so it's kind of a good way to engage them. So sometimes it'll just be parents can just drop by and they just want to know things like what's a safe server on Minecraft, or I've heard about Fortnite, what is it, and how do I keep my child safe on it. Sometimes we might want to do a questionnaire, so they might all have devices there, and just ask the parents, can you just fill out this questionnaire online, and it gives us a bit of a sense about their parents' viewpoints on technology. That works really effectively as well. Or it could just be giving out a leaflet that they've made.
For me, I'm sure you're all very keen to hear, my thoughts are young people need to be more engaged as the carrier of the message. and I've been able to fulfill that objective with my creative lead practitioner appointment, having recently qualified in Wales. I'm available to work in schools with Arts Council money, and I go in with a radio station and we make a live radio show. Parents listen to that because they want to hear how their child sounds, and actually they don't. They want to hear how their neighbour's child sounds, and I've found that to be very well. They do. They want to know how their child sits in the grand scale of things, and you can only do that by finding out how the others are doing. And I've always found that with parents, even they're always listening out to see how the other kids are doing, and not really their child. But anyway, I digress. And that's been a fabulous way, and to hang some really good eSafety. And just this year, I introduced into my magazine style format the gaming report. And in this, I force the children to read out the PEGI rating bands. And so for the first time, parents are hearing what PEGI 12 means. And then perhaps just stopping for one moment to ask their question, is Fortnite the right game for my child? And am I seeing some behaviour changes in him or her because they might be playing that game? And I think that's changing the world through education. And I think that's what we've all signed up to do. And I think it's working terribly well, which is just excellent, which I think just leads us really nicely, I think, onto our final topic for today, and that is new apps. And for me, radio listening would be the best. It would be my app, of course, and you can find that on my website. Just look me up, viewers, on this one. But let's just go round the table again here. What app have you come up since we last met? That would be really useful to hear from that. And for you, you get a free rein because we welcome to the table again. You've not had a chance to voice this, so anything goes, particularly for you. But in the last few months, what app have you come across that's made a real impact on learning?
Can I choose a product?
Of course you may.
And again, it's difficult, isn't it? I mean, you know, as I said, this is a rich landscape. We should be really optimistic, and we should celebrate this sector. I've been particularly struck by the power of EdTech to inspire reading and writing. So education technology equals reading. And the product that I particularly like at the moment is a product called SpyQuest, based in Scotland. It's a combination of gaming, the quest, the spy, is very crucial here to act and behave like a spy in terms of a game, using augmented reality and using SpyQuest books. So it's a combination of, because frankly, education technology, I mean, you know, we love books too, by the way. Sure. It's not an either or, it's not a binary choice. No. We like reading, we love knowledge. We also happen to like other things too. But SpyQuest, I think, is particularly exciting, and I'm loving the fact that they're going into shopping malls and having some of the kind of biggest events, in terms of popularising technology and learning. So yes, SpyQuest.
I love it. And of course, it's not as if we haven't got any of this in the news at all, and there's plenty of it going on.
Absolutely.
A quantum choice, I think.
Very good.
Quantum choice as well. Traci, what about you?
Well, for me, it's an app called For Me, and it's been developed by 4 young people who, by pure coincidence, were at my daughter's secondary school. They decided that there needed to be an app for young people, designed by young people, and they approached Childline. So it's actually a Childline app. The For Me app allows children and young people to access all sorts of advice and information. So it could be around exam pressures, friendships, relationships, online bullying, online safety, all sorts of things. And there's a message board on there called Ask Sam, so if you've got a worry or a concern, you can post that out and other people can they can respond to your question or query. But for me, the most amazing part of it is the ability to text one-to-one to a Childline counsellor from within the app. So when I go into schools and do that direct work with children face-to-face, they can all tell me the Childline number. They'll do me a dance, they'll give it the old 08001111. They know it. They know that that number doesn't show up on a bill. We've done that Childline message and we've done it well. Children will also say, I don't even pick up the phone to my grandma. If I got caught on the phone, who would I say that I was talking to? So this offers them the opportunity to text in their own time, at their own pace. they're going to get good quality advice and support, and a childline counsellor will text them back. So for me, it's an invaluable resource for children and young people, and not enough people know about it, and I'm not entirely sure why. We need to push it. We need to push it further, because sometimes children will do things online that they're embarrassed about. Sometimes children will do things where they don't feel that they can go and talk to their trusted adult or their parent or whoever. I think someone said before about having that step away and just being able to report in a more comfortable way. And this offers that opportunity to children and young people, and it's quality. It's always got to be about quality.
Good. And what was that app again?
For Me.
Excellent. Henry.
Under the banner of mindfulness and well-being, there are actually two apps which sync in together very, very well, which I love and I've discovered. One is called Calm, and Calm effectively helps you with meditation, with de-stressing, and also gives you exercises. So again, great in a classroom, you know, for teachers that want to try and sort of teach that meditation and sort of de-stressing environment. Connected to it is Pillow. So with Pillow, Pillow is a very clever app, and what it will actually do is analyse sleep patterns, and it will only wake you at the point of your lightest sleep, which means that you don't wake up groggy and exhausted in the morning. So you simply say, I want to wake up sometime between 7 and 20 past 7, and it will actually analyse your biometrics to work out within that 20-minute window when is your lightest period of sleep, and wake you up at that point.
I'll wake you up at 11:15.
Have they fixed all the bugs? Because I'm not sure I'm ready to invest in
that. No, it's lovely. It's a lovely app.
So. Excellent. Al, what about you?
Well, I wouldn't mind a dose of Calm, actually. That's probably
right now.
Good.
Dose of Calm on a pillow.
A different area. It's something that's quite close to my heart. So I would have to talk about Really School, which is a new approach for assessing children's learning for early years in Key Stage 1. And much as many will be familiar with, but within the very early primary setting, you know, testing isn't the way that most assessment is done. It's done by observation of children's developmental stages. And EdTech plays a role. Typically we flip round that it's the teacher or TA that's carrying the technology, and it's the children that are playing freeform and doing what they need to do. So how do you capture their evidence, and more importantly, put that alongside the right assessment criteria? So Really School makes it really easy for a tablet-driven teacher or TA to be in the classroom, whether it's in the classroom or the outdoor play area. When they see groups of children, they can select them very quickly and easily, and they can capture observations, be it visual or audio notes that can be shared, and they can automatically assign it against all of the inbuilt assessment criteria. And then the second strand of that, as well as teachers being able to see in a heat map which children have had their observations, where they're secure in their knowledge, or where some children perhaps haven't been assessed as much and they need to go back and actually revisit that. We kind of tick another box that then says one of the strands, mentioned twice, is parental engagement. And parents, or some cohorts of parents, can be really difficult to engage and connect with. But actually one of the ways is that parents, although you can't contact them easily, often have that in their hand. They have their phone, and they're used to social media and they're used to other platforms. So delivering an app that a parent can use that is very Facebook-like in terms of its swipe and see, where teachers can share exemplars of what the children have been doing in class. This is how your child's doing. This is how your child did their reading. Here's pictures of their trip. It engages a parent to actually respond and share back feedback, and it starts to open the communication pathway. So for me, because it's nice and simple and easy to use, and it kind of changes the way we do observations, it would be Really School.
And what I like particularly about the app is that you don't have to be online to make the observation and record it. Absolutely stunning. Mark, what about you?
I'm going to go for two as well, if that's all right. The first one is an app called Metaverse. Okay, now it can be used in lots and lots of different ways. It's an augmented reality app. Okay, there is a community aspect to it, so you can sort of search for other things to do within the app. But essentially, you can create your own augmented reality experiences. Okay, now you can, and there's a whole lot of coding stuff that goes on behind this. Let me explain how it works. So you would load the app, okay, and you can either search for, or you can sort of through a QR code access the activity somebody else might have made for you, or you can search for things. I could have made one for learners in my classroom, which was testing them around something they've been learning about. You mentioned the Romans before, so let's say the Romans. Okay, so it comes up, and Marcus Aurelius' bust comes up in augmented reality. You're looking at it, and as you sort of interact with the bust, so you're being asked questions and you can work your way through and all that sort of thing. It's really engaging, it's great fun. Why I really like it though is sort of twofold really. One, you don't have to be the person yourself as an educator making these things. Okay, so your children could be making these quizzes, these tests and all the rest of it, which in itself is a great way of them showing what they know and all that sort of thing as well. But I was talking with an educator from Australia called Brett Salakas. He's Mr. Salakas on Twitter. He set up the Aussie Ed sort of big Twitter chat, which is huge in Australia. And he was talking about something, and it links through to your spy quest thing in many ways as well. And when I was a child, I used to love those sort of Dungeons & Dragons adventure books and things, right? And he was saying, well, you can do this sort of thing with this. And of course you can, because you can do branching. So as you're sort of putting your one character up there, it's like, you know, do you want to go west and do this, or do you want to go east and do that? And you can work your way through. Now, for some of our boys in particular who struggle with wanting to or being able to write stories and putting things down with their literacy, this is a fantastic thing. So you can do this within the app, and it's free as well. So the app is Metaverse. You can do the creating of the experiences at metaverse.io, and it's really, really good. The second thing I'd like to advocate is actually no apps. Because as educators get towards the summer holidays, you know, it is really important to turn yourself off a bit. I would suspect that a large number of the audience watching this and learning from us are those people who are really connected. They're on Twitter, they're learning from people, having Twitter conversations, they're on Pinterest, they're watching YouTube videos, they're doing all these things. But actually, you know, you've got 6 weeks off. Okay, you might get 2 weeks within there to go away on holiday. You know, why not just remove Twitter from your phone? Why not just take some of those things away? Turn those notifications off completely. It will still be there when you get back. Because, you know, if you want to be rested and well, ready for the next academic year, no better way than just to give yourself a bit of a break from all of it. So that's my second app.
No apps.
None of the above. I like this. None of the above. It is like a Brexit vote, isn't it? None of the above. The best choice on the list. That's always a pleasure. No. Kellie.
My product is not necessarily, it's not a new one, but it's one that's definitely constantly evolving, is Minecraft for education. So it's something that the educators that use it well, but there's a massive, I'm sure you'd agree, Mark, there's a massive majority of teachers that haven't yet been brave enough to dabble with it.
It's like, and those teachers I hear from, like Paul Lanny Watkins, for example, you know, what they're doing there now, it's absolutely amazing. And again, that agency for young learners better showcase that stuff. But it's just so few are doing it. We need to see so many more getting involved with Minecraft.
Yeah, definitely.
Could we use digital leaders to make that more possible in our schools?
Yeah, definitely. The children know how to play it. It's just the teachers being brave enough to just to remember that as teachers, we've got the skills that we need to teach whatever it may be. So, for example, I mean, I've used Minecraft to, when we've been learning about the Egyptians, we've been learning about pyramids. So they've done the research beforehand. Rather than recording that on a worksheet, they've gone and made the pyramids in Minecraft, and then they've walked through it and recorded themselves talking about why the hieroglyphics are there or why the tomb is there. So much more powerful than writing down on a worksheet, and engages a variety of learning styles as well. So, and using it to enhance literacy or numeracy. Again, you've got children who you ask them to write a descriptive passage on, I don't know, walk through the woods. They don't know where to start. Well, make it in Minecraft first, live it, talk to your friend about it, make it with your friend, collaborate together, and then they've got you know, once they're able to talk about it, they're normally a lot more capable when it comes to writing it. And obviously there's so much more of it can do, is coding and science and citizenship. It's just vast, isn't it?
Well, our subscribers to this particular video recording on YouTube tell us that this is by far the most valuable bit in our contribution. It's kind of hearing these views here. So I'd like to thank everyone who's been subscribing to our channel. Thank you so much indeed. You've made this an incredibly popular piece, and we look forward to our next one in the series. Who would have thought when we did number 1 that we'd even get to number 3? But here we are. I'd like to thank the guests around the table, all of you. Thank you very much indeed for your contributions. A fascinating topical discussion that clearly the profession needs to have, and we need more of it. It's great to have had our young people as a part of today's discussion. On behalf of us all, thank you very much indeed for your time today.
Thank you. Thank you.